Hello, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'm assuming this green button here advances slides. Okay. As Jeremy mentioned, I have a background in farming. I'm truly a farm girl at heart. And so I'm going to have a little conversation with you today about agricultural water management. And I truly appreciate being here in events like this. I learned something through every one of these presentations today. And actually, each one of these topics tie in directly to agricultural water management. Ready? The button is not advancing. There we go. So a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. Of course, the importance of agricultural water management. Ultimately, water is the foundation of agriculture and soil health. We're going to look at some managed and unmanaged landscapes and the difference locally, provincially, nationally. Why, of course, all of this matters. Collaboration and extension. Talk about the Saskatchewan Drainage Extension Network, the gaps that exist across the landscape today, and of course, opportunities, program considerations, and enhancements for the next policy framework. So I stand here to represent Saskatchewan Farm Stewardship. SaskFSA was formed in 2011 in the Prairie Pothole region as we experience excess water cycles across our province. And so every one of us in this room knows that we can experience drought and flooding, sometimes even within the same field. And so excess water, of course, impacts productive agriculture acres. So a group of progressive farmers got together and went to the MLA and said, hey, we need some help. We need to be able to manage this water and we need policy to support proper management of that water. And he said, well, yes, you do. You need to form an association. You need a bigger voice. And so they did. They formed SaskFSA. So the purpose of our organization is to partner with the regulators and government to develop that practical win-win land and water policy solutions that benefit farmers and the environment. Of course, to deliver that field validated economic data analysis, to explain or communicate the importance of proper water management, to maintain positive relationships with all stakeholders, and to be recognized as a leading source of information. So let's talk about some land use across this wonderful country that we live in. And it's really big as a country, but only 6 to 7% of Canadian farmland is actually suitable for food production. And so in Saskatchewan, we have a big job to do here. We host 40% of Canadian farmland in Saskatchewan. And I like to say that we're pretty well balanced when it comes to annual crop production acres, forage, native grasslands, and our water systems. So we're pretty well balanced there. Forests come in at about 43% and other natural lands, and 2% is urban and infrastructure. If any of you have any other numbers that can complement this or dispute these, please let me know. They're kind of hard to find. But when we look at the other provinces, so if we look at Alberta, Alberta represents about 21 million acres at 22%, and Manitoba comes in at about 12 acres with 12%. So collectively, 74% of the food production acres in Canada are in the prairie provinces. So when we look at that, we have millions of acres to manage as farmers. So land and water stewardship is a really important high profile job. Sorry, every time you move that little thing and I lose my clicker. Thank you. So while we represent all these millions of acres, fun fact is that farmers are actually a voting minority. So across the provinces, Manitoba, Alberta, 2% of the voting population is farmers, farm families. And we set at about 2.5% in Saskatchewan here. So the point being is that policy really needs to reflect the realities on the farm. And so I will tell you, policy is not easy, and it is really important that everyone kind of gets involved in a collective way. So I like to talk about this topic, the agriculture zone in our province. It is determined by the soil zones across our province. And you can see that the climatic zones or topsoil moisture conditions overlay almost exactly on top of the productive soil zones. And then on the far right, we have our watershed vulnerability mapping. And so that's basically saying there's areas across the province that experience more moisture conditions. And we do know that agriculture water management can actually reduce risk and vulnerability in those areas to support that productive agriculture zone. So there's a lot of different ways maybe to define agriculture water management. You can look at it as drainage. You can look at it as irrigation. You can look at it as water use efficiency. You can even look at it as organic matter. So I just want to clarify too that whenever I use the word drainage, I am talking responsible drainage. I'm talking drainage management. Okay, so lots of different ways how to define ag water management. For our nutrient stewardship, it's been mentioned today already. If we could do the 4 R's of water management, the right amount of moisture, the right time, the right form, the right place, ultimately, that would be a pretty significant win for agriculture, but we obviously cannot do that. We do know a crop can hold its breath for about 24 to 48 hours. And we do know that our landscapes are variable and our weather is extremely variable. And so I did mention before you can have drought and flood in the same field at the same time. So looking at this image on the left, any guesses on what happened to this little crop here? Pardon? Heavy rain, excess water, sitting in a depression in the field. Absolutely. You can see a lot of visual impacts of that. What's the difference on this for this image on the right? No rain, right? So if we look at them, are they really that different? So we can have excess water, we can have drought. It still impacts crop vigor, stress, uniformity, disease, yield. It impacts soil and microbe health, water use efficiency, nutrient use efficiency, weed pressure, control, weed resistance, overlap, inputs, lost crop inputs, time, equipment, efficiency, repairs, greenhouse gases, and the carbon footprint. Are they really that different? Some minor ways. So if we look at our prairie pothole region, hands up if you've ever experienced a field condition like this. And hands up if you've ever experienced 2 years of weather the same in farming. I have not had anyone put, oh, is there? One hand there. Often that is not the case. And often it takes quite a few days to get dry, but it only takes an hour or more to get wet. So let's talk about field efficiency. And so ultimately, yes, in farming, yield and economics drives our farming business. And so when we look at water, we always say that water resources are best when they're managed. This yield map here represents a field that has both surface and tile drainage. You can see the agriculture zone throughout the middle there. Yields basically tell the story that that's a fairly well-managed field. You can see some red areas, some little depression areas there. You can also see that ag ecozone that sits around the boundary of the field. This is a visual of targeted tile within that agriculture zone. So I wish I had a laser. You could see how the tile drainage is basically connecting the pothole depressions across the landscape. And of course, tile is always accompanied by proper surface drainage also. And you can see the ag ecozones that function as those permanent functioning wetland areas around the perimeter of the agriculture zone. So any guesses if this field is managed with drainage or not? Hands up if you think it is. It actually is fully managed. So this is that same field that you just seen previously. This is the next spring. So this drained field is actually doing its job very well. It's providing that flood control at the start of the spring season. It's providing that ground table water recharge, and it's also providing that seasonal migratory habitat. And I always say that cropland is definitely habitat, and this just provides some more evidence for that. So it's doing its job in spring and also in crop. So we experienced some June rains, quite a bit of June rain actually this year, and that egg zone is still functioning really well with that drainage management plan. And then this is the September harvest date for that field. This is drainage management, this is field efficiency, and this is the balanced agriculture zone. So back to the yield map. This is the exact yield map for that exact field. And conversely, this is the field across the road. Do you see any differences? There's quite a few. So the whole point of this slide here is that acres, inputs, overlap, time, fuel, equipment, corners, compaction, weeds, bushels, all of it adds up and all of it matters. And field efficiency, I like to challenge this question, but is it one of the most important variables related to sustainability in Canadian agriculture? It could be. So we're going to provide a few scenarios here. So looking at potholes, how many potholes might you have across a quarter section, and the cost of those potholes, whether they're managed or they're unmanaged. So 2019, we could have said a managed pothole would gain you $85 an acre. Conversely, spring of 2024, it actually doubled to $170 an acre. And right now, the cost sits at around $110 an acre. So the whole point of it is it varies due to markets, but the whole point is whether it's managed or unmanaged, you're looking at a cost benefit of $110 an acre or a loss of $110 an acre. We know that farmers can do a really good job of stewardship if they operate in the black. This is, those little books you used to get and you had to like look and find the little image or the little thing. Try and find the auto steer pass in this image. One very small one on the kind of middle left of this picture. And so the point of this picture is that technology can only do so much. So we have all these great technologies that have been mentioned already: zero till, auto steer, variable rate, sectional control. But in an inefficient field, they can only do so much. So crunching the numbers, it takes time to turn. And actually, we have actually counted how many times a piece of equipment will turn in a managed field versus an unmanaged field. And on a good field, you can turn 75 times. On an unmanaged field, you'll be turning around 400 plus times. All of that adds up. Do you want to spend 9 more hours turning in a field, or do you got some better things to do with your time? Looking at cost of ownership and depreciation of equipment, looking at extra fuel and that carbon footprint of that, and looking at overlap. So the whole point of this, these numbers are variable, but they all add up. We can talk about fertilizer efficiency. Add another layer in. So you see these little depressional areas, crop loss, weed pressures, salinity across the field. You can have half an acre drown out because of excess water, but it's not just that half an acre. Yep, you can think that that crop around that half acre is going to live. Nope, it's not. And then the marginal area of 50% yield, 75% yield, until you get back to a recovery zone. So we know these small areas can impact up to 2 to 3 to 5 times their size. And so if you look at the fertilizer use efficiency, well, obviously you're not using fertilizer where that crop has died, or you're significantly reducing your fertilizer efficiency in those marginal areas. So the whole point of this, I guess, is to say that field efficiency is really important. Drainage management can help us improve the field efficiency of our fields. It's not just our crop health and soil health. It's our resilience when it comes to flood control through our fields and also our local communities. And sometimes drainage is often, sometimes often misunderstood, but it's ultimately one of the most important business risk management tools that farmers have when they're experiencing excess water. And so we can look at the business risk management programs that were discussed earlier today. You can look at crop insurance, for example. That's a reactive program. Or you can look at proper water management, whether that's drainage or irrigation, and you're providing that proactive stewardship piece. So linking all of this together, we believe that agriculture water management is a critical link in climate resiliency and food security. We can also agree that water management is very complex. There's a lot of different layers here when we use the term agriculture water management, looking at drainage, looking at irrigation, looking at soil health, nutrient and water use, wetland and landscape hydrology, climate risk, variability, governance, infrastructure, economics. The whole point of that is we have a lot of leading experts in this province, so it's not really knowledge that's an issue. And I think we can all agree that water is not a fringe issue in agriculture. It's definitely a production issue. It's a stewardship issue. It's a risk management issue, a food security issue. And I like to take that word and turn it around to opportunity. And having ag water involved in the next policy framework, you know what I'm trying to say, linked into it is actually probably one of the best ways for Saskatchewan to lead with practical, scalable, and producer-led initiatives. So lots of pieces exist already when it comes to water management. There is some pieces that exist. So we have some really valuable programs that are on the ground right now. The Farm Ranch Water Infrastructure Program, WSA's Ag Water Management Fund, the business risk management programs that were already discussed today. And these programs are really valuable, but they do operate independently. And so when we look at fragmented programs versus a coordinated approach, what do you think is better and more effective? So if I haven't got this point across yet, agriculture water does belong in the next policy framework. Every productive acre, every food production system, and every community relies on water management. To be effective, water needs to move. No different than Eric talking about the grain rail transportation system previously. Water management, of course, is climate resilience. Let's be more proactive on that and build that in. And I think it was Ken that mentioned if we can support, the business risk management programs are important, but if we can promote that proactive approach to stewardship in those BMPs, that's really effective. And in Saskatchewan, managing 38 million acres, we're uniquely positioned to lead this. So you might be thinking there's an elephant in the room, and there actually is, and I really like elephants. I think they're amazing animals. But the point is the words on the screen, and we're not here to ignore the words. It is not agriculture versus conservation. It is us working together to deliver better outcomes. And so lots of funding programs are essentially focused on the conservation outcomes. And while that is really important, the agriculture zone also requires support. We require support for productive drainage, those drainage stewardship or BMPs, irrigation access and efficiency, and the regional coordination of all of that. So ultimately, improving the tools that producers have, developing some new tools, and basically creating more impact across more acres. So this leads me into a favorite story, or a story I like to tell. Across our province, whether unintentionally or intentionally, information silos exist. And I think we can all readily identify with that. We also have two really important resources in this. We have lots of important resources, but two of the important ones are people and water. And we do know that we can do better when it comes to developing strategic relationships and partnerships. I would like to introduce to you the Saskatchewan Drainage Extension Network, formed in 2024. This is a private sector leadership initiative bringing together landowners, bringing together ag associations, industry, academia, strategic advisors, regulators, government, bringing everyone to the same table. And so since we formed, I just want to clarify that drainage is in the name of this network, but it also involves irrigation. And so when we sat together for the first inaugural meeting, we had a meeting facilitator, and we sat down to determine the terms of reference, and we didn't even get past the name of the network. And they said, well, I don't think you should have drainage in the name. And it was kind of unanimous across the team. And so the facilitator said, okay, go back to your little groups here and come up with a new name. And so we spent 20 minutes talking about the name, and it was unanimous when everyone came back and they said, you know what, we need to keep drainage in the name. It represents the majority of acres in this province that need to rely on water management. And even if it is irrigation, drainage is a part of that program too. So we decided we're going to lead with transparency and trust, keep drainage in the name, and we did add a tagline, promoting sustainable ag water management. So when leaders sit together at the same table, it matters. Time is one of our most valuable resources. And when they sit together, it builds momentum, it sharpens alignment, and it creates more impact. It scales impact across acres, across regions, and across programs. And so we sat there and asked why we were here at this table. It was unanimous that we can do better. And it was really neat to sit there and listen to everybody's comments on why they chose to sit at this table. And this is our team. Some of them are here today. And so the whole point of this is that we are collaborating. Our partners are doing lots of really important work in the ag water space every single day. And we're coming to the same table to have the same conversation to talk about how we can collaborate and innovate. So the network itself, just really designed to connect people, to share and build that knowledge on innovative, responsible water management practices for healthier soil, resilient crops, and sustainable landscapes, and that research and education platform to foster trust relationships, communication, and obviously solutions. The three priority areas are drainage and irrigation research, drainage BMPs, and that connection and education piece. And so we have a really neat research project on the ground. I wish I could add it in a few more slides here. But ultimately, eternal optimist, I'm like, what if you take a look at this slide, what if we could accomplish all of these things with one single research project? We know that the farmer sees the economic benefit of drainage or water management every time they step in the cab and drive in a field. They see it. But the other point of this is, how do we quantify the agronomic stewardship side of improving that field efficiency through water management? And how do we quantify those environmental co-benefits of also improving that? So as I mentioned, lots of important research going on throughout the province with our different partners, Irrigation Saskatchewan, Croptimistic, Crop Intelligence, and the University of Saskatchewan. So SaskDen is ultimately a collaboration hub for lots of these conversations. We've had two important meetings to date, bringing together partners, having some deep listening projects, and to define what the roadmap could look like for the SaskDen. So the roadmap is in place. Our core pillars, we are elevating applied research and demonstration across the province. We are initiating drainage BMP development, Saskatchewan-made BMPs. We are mobilizing an information hub and knowledge sharing platform. We are gaining momentum, and to me, this is super exciting, bringing together more partners for an extension network collaboration piece, but we are definitely lacking sustainable funding. So the gap, without coordination between policy, research, extension, and farm implementation. We can do all the research we want, but if it's not reaching the farm, are we creating the impact that we want to see? So back to those gaps, what we see is research not reaching producers, and this comes directly from our colleagues at the University of Saskatchewan. Successful practices not scaling up the way they should. Short-term research losing expertise. How defeating is that when we had some really brilliant minds leaving the university, but we don't have permanent positions for them? And we see investments occurring in isolation. So lots of valuable work is happening. We just are not realizing the full potential of all of those efforts. The gap is not effort. The gap is coordination and funding to support it. And as I mentioned earlier, every one of the presentations today have tied in directly to some of these talking points. So some suggestions for program enhancements for the next policy framework. Support new and existing ag water management funding streams. Looking at new drainage stewardship. Looking at irrigation efficiency. Applied research and monitoring. Supporting the SaskDen and other partner watershed coordination efforts. Investing in that permanent agriculture water research capacity. Potentially an ag water research chair at the University of Saskatchewan. All in support of that long-term knowledge continuity. Fund demonstration and BMP validations. Having demonstration sites across different soil zones. It was mentioned earlier today on the wheat breeding side. We can't breed wheat in one location and expect that it's going to work across the entire province. We need to look at consistent performance measures. How do we provide those KPIs? Invest in research translation. We know that research doesn't always connect to people, and we need to make sure that it does. So that's extension activities and field learning, and it's knowledge sharing across partners. So ultimately, it's not about starting from scratch. It's just about scaling and improving what already exists. And back to that new and existing, a lot of funding programs want to fund new things. But also, there's a lot of existing work on the landscape that needs support, that needs that continuity of funding to highlight successful BMPs, to build that producer confidence, and to accelerate adoption. And of course, the new coordinated research. Man, the AI stuff that was just presented was kind of mind-blowing. My background, my education is in animal nutrition, and some of that just blew my mind. So ultimately, we need to build that or bridge that gap between the research and the farm connection and implementation piece. So the opportunity for the next policy framework is to build a more coordinated agriculture water management system that can tie into many of the things that we talked about already today, but particular to water management, to build that long-term research capacity, to retain that critical knowledge, to connect research to people, to create impact through extension, to accelerate adoption and scale of Saskatchewan-made BMPs, to strengthen our climate resilience across our ag landscapes and also our communities, to align water management with climate and food security outcomes, and to advance innovative collaborative leadership, whether that's the SaskDen or some other great collaborative initiatives out there. So ultimately, what does success look like? It looks like stronger farms, stronger communities. It looks like stronger climate resilience. It looks like protection of farm infrastructure, not only in your soils and in your crops, but also in your local communities and across the province. It looks like increased public trust in agriculture. And as mentioned earlier today, apparently we have global trade disruptions. And that's not something new, but it's something very current right now. And so how can we become more resilient to respond to some of these things? So I would like to thank you for the conversation, although I did all the talking. And I do look forward to continuing more dialogue with you, each and every one of you, on agriculture water management. Thank you.
Candace, thank you very much. At this point,